I'd like to take a second before I begin. And I'm in Aspen, Colorado, and that's the traditional land of the Ute peoples and Ute tribe. And they've stewarded this land for generations. And I just like to start by expressing my reverence. I had the great fortune to meet with Skylar, who's a member of the Ute tribe this week, and it just reminded me that I am but a small blip on a long history of peoples who have stewarded this land. My name is Katy Nelson, and it's my honor to serve as the Wilderness and Trails Specialist on the Aspen-Sopris Ranger District. I also have the great honor of serving on the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council. I actually like to start by saying it's really scary and vulnerable for me to present. And it was really fun and also intimidating scrolling through the participants list and then to see this map that Dusty shared of where everyone is joining from. So that's wow. It's just amazing that so many people are attending. And after every presentation, I always walk away and think, oh my gosh, what did I say? I'll learn something new. I'll go back and wonder if I shared what I wanted to share. So I always say, thanks for the space and grace. You all have been modeling that so beautifully this week. So thanks for extending that to me today. I have so much to learn on this topic. I am glad we're all here together. It just tells me that we're all committed, that we care. So today, we're going to be discussing a big topic, permits, visitor capacity. I just caught the tail end of Jason Fisher's. It's a really big topic, and to me, that's just the, I think of an iceberg. We may only hit the tip, we may dive under the surface, but I just want to share what's in it for you today, or what I'm hoping you get out of this. So first, I hope you'll take away some tools, some visitor capacity concepts and tools. And just as importantly, if not more importantly, I'll help you know where to look for those resources and tools to help you. Second, you'll have the opportunity to flex and stretch your mind muscle as depicted by this awesome graphic. I will, I hope, provide you with some ideas to consider. And then finally, I just hope you'll walk away knowing that you're not alone in the challenges of visitor use management. All of your concerns, your challenges are totally understandable. They're valid. And the fact that so many people are registered this week and to take this specific course just gives me hope that we're willing to take on these challenges. So hopefully I've already accomplished this third goal of telling you that you're not alone just by sharing the participants and willingness of people to be here, and for you to see everyone else who's willing to be engaged. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing what looks like an experiment on the screen. So I'm gonna just start with an experiment just to get your mind going. And I chose this picture because I just never know how this experiment's gonna unfold. So I'm going to show you a picture on the next screen, and some of you may have seen it. And I'm just going to kindly ask that you look at it and then just await further direction. Okay, so I want everyone to look at this picture. It's a dress. And I'm going to ask you to use your chat feature. And on the count of 3, I want everyone to put into the chat box what 2 colors they see here. Okay, on the count of 3, you're going to put in the chat what colors you see. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm sure you're seeing the chat on my screen. I apologize.
Yeah, you're getting.
Okay. Go ahead.
You're getting tons of responses, Katy. I'm not sure if you can see them or not.
I can, and so I hope what you all are noticing is I see a lot of black and blue, and I see white and gold. I also see someone noted that it was throwback, and I love that comment. I also love this dress. So I just want to stop there. Like, this is a picture of a dress that's 2 colored. It should be simple, right? Is it black and blue, or is it white and gold? Right? I mean, I think this is a really fascinating, and I wish we were in person because it's awesome to see everyone's surprised look. So you'll just have to imagine those. But I bet those that typed black and blue would have probably bet their life savings on it, that that is a black and blue dress. And similarly, those that wrote white and gold would likely feel just as strong. I mean, it seems to me like something you should be very certain on, right? I saw a couple of people who thought they might see it both ways. It says, Rachel, I see it switched on me. That is so fascinating. So what I'll share is what inevitably happens when I do this experiment is someone says, what, how's this possible? I don't understand it. Spoiler alert, I can't explain it. It just sounds to me like if that's what you're wondering, it's a great opportunity to do some research. However, the reason I start with this experiment and my point is that something you think is really simple and really obvious. This is a dress, what two colors is it? May not be that simple and obvious, and someone may see it very differently. And so as we dive into these topics, I just encourage you to approach this topic with that mindset that you may think something is black and white, or for me, black and blue in this case, and someone else may see it very differently. So I just encourage you to remember that through this and stop and say, you know, how do you see it? I'm so curious to hear more. I love that experiment. I still don't understand it. Okay, so I promise we're going to get to visitor capacity, but I just want to share a quick personal story. So picture me as a wilderness ranger, not in a sweater with glasses at my desk. This will help you. There's me as a wilderness ranger. I'm very happy in my element. I often patrolled a very popular trail in the wilderness where I worked. It was a looped trail with 2 beautiful mountain passes, gorgeous lakes, dramatic rock and ice scenery, really the whole wilderness package. And it was popular for those reasons. And I remember sitting with my supervisor in a wilderness ranger meeting, probably near the end of the season, tired, dirty, burnt out, exasperated. Okay, wait. Like that. And saying to her, this place needs a permit system. The other tired and dirty and fed up wilderness rangers agreed with me. We were over it. It was too busy. The only option we saw was that it needed a permit system to limit use. And what I remember is that she pushed back, and I was really frustrated. And I thought, why can't she see that this is a problem? What the heck? There's too many people out there. Why doesn't she want to do anything? Et cetera, et cetera. So for some of you, this may sound familiar. Okay. So fast forward. Here I am giving a presentation on visitor capacity, and I've just implemented an overnight permit system in an area of the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness. And here's a common conversation I have. And pretend that's me on the right in this picture. And then the person on the left was maybe me, the exasperated ranger. So the person on the left, we need a permit system. Me, tell me more about why you say that. The person, there's too many people. Me, tell me more about why you think there's too many people. Person, it's just too crowded. Me, what makes you believe it's too crowded? Person, there's just too many people. Me, I hear you, and it sounds like you're frustrated. It also sounds like you genuinely care about the place you're describing. It may be that a permit system could help, but first, help me understand more about the area. My intent in sharing this is not, and you'll see, you know, that's kind of modeled on like a therapy conversation. But my intent in sharing this is not to judge the person who's come to me or even judge my past self. It's all very understandable and I can empathize. And I'm guessing you can relate to some piece of this. Like I said, in this case, this person on the left, they've perceived change. They perceive the change as problematic. That person cares about the area. That person wants to fix that perceived problem. And in this case, the intent of my questioning, and probably what my supervisor was doing many years ago, is to get down to the core. And that will be the theme of the rest of our time together today. Just asking questions, approaching with curiosity, and getting to the core. Okay, so how do you go about getting to the core? How do you decide, as the title implies, to permit or not to permit? So one of the goals today was for you to walk away with tools, and I'm going to dive into some of these tools and concepts to help with the conversation around visitor capacity. But first, I want to do some audience sensing. Okay, so here's what I want everyone to do. I'm hoping that on your screen, you see a question that says, what comes to mind when you think of a permit? I want everyone on their computer or phone to go to menti.com, MENTI.com, enter the code 28095430. That's at the top of the screen. I'm going to give everyone just a minute or two to put in what comes to mind when they think of permits. And hopefully they'll start populating. Yeah, this is interesting. Restrictions, limits. And the way this functions is that if an entry is, the more it's entered, the bigger it will be. Limitations, access, lottery, luck, barriers I see in there, sustainable use, lack of autonomy. Wow, rec.gov, paperwork. Yeah, interesting. I'll give everyone just a little bit more time. I know we have a lot of folks here, 100 participants. Limit seems to be, limits restriction. Yeah. And what's interesting, folks can keep populating, but what I see kind of, it runs the spectrum. I even see evil in there, you know, and what I want to share is that I think I just want to validate that these are all, you know, very real thoughts, experiences, and sentiments around permits. And I think it's really powerful to see how folks perceive and think of these. And I cannot see one on there that I can't relate to at this moment. Okay, I'm going to turn the Menti poll off, so I'll give you 10 seconds if you're still doing it. $6, I like that one. Okay, thanks everyone for participating. Okay, so I think that hopefully kind of gets our mind into, you know, one of the big topics that comes up under visitor capacity, which is permits. So, you know, as we dive in, I'm going to start with a quick recap. And I'll preface this by saying, don't worry, I'm going to present a lot of resources and tools. I'll drop them all the resources I mentioned, I'll drop them into chat and we'll figure out a way that you can have access. So, but I'm going to start here with a quick recap. Perhaps some of you saw this in Linda Marigliano's talk on Monday, and it's important to highlight in the visitor capacity conversation that it really can't happen without first referencing a bigger visitor use management process or effort. So visitor capacity does not happen in a vacuum, and I would be remiss if I stepped into a visitor capacity conversation without first mentioning a larger visitor use management intentional effort. So we're not going to dive entirely into the framework. I would say that would be a separate class. And if you really take away one thing, just know that visitor capacity is not visitor use management. It's a tool in the visitor use management belt. So, you know, I'll note that this is just one of many tools. I think what's special about this framework and why I and many others happen to be partial to this one is that it was developed across 6 federal agencies with leadership support. And that's a big deal. I think a lot of folks would understand how big of a deal that is. What you should know is that it outlines a defensible and transparent decision-making process for managing all aspects of visitor use, and permits are a very big deal. And so if you think you may end up there, having a defensible and transparent decision-making process, in addition to other benefits, will be beneficial specifically for a permit system. So as we dive into visitor capacity, you know, if you're looking for a place to start or you're feeling stuck, I really suggest this tool or any visitor use management framework tool. You know, what I'll share there too is you can make it work for any situation. Oops. Thanks for your patience while I navigate. So there's a concept, it's the sliding scale. And if you get anything out of that, just know that this framework allows you to adjust your visitor use management to a large, you know, highly controversial, complex project, or a very small project at a small local scale, non-controversial. And that allows you to invest time, energy, money, and other resources to be commensurate with the project. Oops. The other thing before we get too far away from the framework is I'll just remind you that this graphic shows the 4 major elements of a visitor use management planning process. So in the upper left, you'll see the why, building the foundation. Then it goes to the what, defining visitor use management direction. In the lower right, in the green, identifying visitor use management strategies. And then in the blue, the do part, where you've implemented and then you're monitoring, evaluating, and adjusting. So today we're going to spend a lot of time in step 3, which is the green. Okay, this slide might be overwhelming to you, but this is just another graphic of the framework. You see the why, what, how, and do across the top with some steps that could help you in that process. And what I really want to highlight here is that we're here to talk about visitor capacity, and that's nested into this larger process. So I would just offer again that it's not a standalone, it's not a separate entity, and you'll notice that I mentioned that a lot. And if I can go there, a permit system is just one tool to allocate visitor capacity. So I'm a visual person, and this helps for me, and maybe not, it won't be helpful for you, but to me, picturing like a, you know, a nested doll scenario where if you can picture permits as the smallest, they're nested inside of visitor capacity, which is all nested inside of, you know, good visitor use management. Okay, so we're finally going to dive into visitor capacity, and I'm going to offer you another tool, and it'll guide this conversation, and it's the Visitor Capacity Guidebook. And so this is another product by the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council, and I'm going to use the concept in this guidebook to walk us through a conversation about visitor capacity. So a couple of things about this guidebook. It was developed to expand on that framework and to provide specific direction for identifying and implementing visitor capacity, which I'm wondering if that's what you might be craving if you're in this class. It answers questions we often have when tackling this complex issue. Questions like, why do we need visitor capacity? What is visitor capacity? How does a project team identify it? How does a project team implement it? What are some of the tools for allocating a visitor capacity? Remember, a permit system is only one of those. And it also provides some case studies. Okay, so why, you know, with talking about visitor capacity, why identify it? You know, I think there are many reasons. Those that I would highlight are, you know, at the end of the day, it may help you maintain opportunities for visitors and protect the resource. And that's very big picture, but that's the why behind it, is that it may help you meet your objectives and your desired conditions and your goals, which for a lot of us is opportunities for visitors and protection of the resource. It may be that you're required by law. We'll talk about that. And again, it may support your short and long-term stewardship goals. For some, the why might be just out of sheer desperation. And I say that kind of with a wink, but I've seen people go here when they feel like they have nowhere else to go. But what I'll ask is that if you're there, that's okay. I'll talk about how you can tie that into the bigger picture. Okay, so what is, I'm really sorry, everyone. If anyone has a suggestion for me on how to get that Zoom piece off, I'm open to it. So what that says under there is, what is visitor capacity? So in general, visitor capacity, or capacity, let's just start with capacity, is how much of one thing fits into another thing. Or perhaps, how many things can a thing contain? That's trademarked. No, I'm just kidding. And I know that some of you are probably cringing. That's not an official statement, but I think that's just a way to think about it. Basically, how much of one thing can fit into another. But in more seriousness, the definition of visitor capacity is on your screen. And this is the definition that's been defined by the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council. And I'll read it to you. It's the maximum amount and type of visitor use that an area can accommodate while achieving and maintaining the desired resource conditions and visitor experiences that are consistent with the purposes for which the area was established. So it is how much of a thing, in this case, amounts and types of visitors, can fit into another thing. In this case, the resource or the visitor experience. As you'll see below, I have two examples of places that might end up with very different visitor capacities, i.e. how much amount and type of visitor use that they can accommodate and still meet the goals. So on the left, I would think that looks like Old Faithful and Yellowstone National Park, and on the right, Conundrum Hot Springs in the Marin Belt Mass Wilderness. So to round out this definition, I just want to note that there are two parts to this visitor capacity. The visitor capacity itself, okay, amount and type, and then identification of management strategies and actions to manage within that capacity. So you get the capacity, and then the next step is what's your tools to manage to that. The thing I'll share before I leave this is the topic of visitor capacity has a long history and a topic of interest to many. And as we noted in the word cloud, there's a lot of association with that, the permit side of it, but just visitor capacity in general. So there's been a lot of research and time spent on visitor capacity. And as far as this definition, some folks may have a different definition or have seen something else. What I would share with this is that this is the result of 6 federal agencies concurring on not only the definition of capacity, but also how it fits within visitor use management. So again, to me, that's a big deal, knowing what, the scope of 6 agencies and finding some agreement around it. So that's what I would offer, and I apologize, with this definition. Okay. So I think to just understand the definition of visitor capacity, it may help to understand what it is and what it isn't. Visitor capacity is a management tool, and in some cases, a legal requirement. We often say that visitor capacity is an outcome of a larger visitor use management process. When using this tool, I say this a lot, but it should be clear that visitor capacity, aka managing amounts and types of visitor use, will directly relate to achieving the desired condition. So it's a management tool. Visitor capacity is based on desired conditions. A visitor capacity is not identified in a vacuum. It's identified only after decisions are made about the management objectives, the desired conditions. It's a tool to get you to your goal. So for example, the visitor capacity for Old Faithful, which is a geothermal area, or maybe a roadside hot spring in Wyoming, the visitor capacity for those are going to look different from each other and may be very different from, for example, Conundrum Hot Springs, another geothermal area in the Marin Bell Snowmass Wilderness. So even though they might have similar resource attributes, the visitor capacity and the desired condition may be very different. So visitor capacity is based on a variety of inputs. Examples of these inputs include best available science about, resources or visitor experiences, and that includes social science and rec ecology. And there's a lot of amazing research scientists coming at these topics from all angles. And so I think the inputs are just as expansive as folks who are doing the research. Professional judgment, experience, and expertise is an input that can feed into visitor capacity. Monitoring data, lessons learned, public input, all of the, visitor capacity is based on a variety of inputs. And then finally, visitor capacity is a number, and this is where people commonly go. Like we talked about, it's the maximum amount and type of visitor use that can be accommodated. Again, amount and type. This could be number of people, number of groups, number of stock, number of boats, heartbeats, vehicles, commercial, non-commercial, administrative landings. It might need to vary over space and time. People per hour, right? Amount and type. People per hour versus people per day, launches per day. It is a number, and it'll be based on all aspects of amount and types of use that will affect the desired conditions. So I'll give a quick example. In the 70s, there were river-based capacities focused on encounter rates with boats from other parties. However, visitors shifted from big rafts to kayaks, so encounters with number of other boats were exceeding the thresholds without an increase in visitation. So in that case, both the overall number of people and boats might be important. So just a consideration for visitor capacity as you're considering the number itself and what those numbers are and what they're based on. And then finally, visitor capacity is a precursor to making allocation decisions, which we'll talk about. That's that second part of visitor capacity. Okay, what visitor capacity is not? It's not visitor use management. I think I've made that very clear. It's a part of visitor use management. It is not an isolated decision. It's only identified after making decisions about desired conditions, management goals, taking law, all of those inputs into consideration. Visitor capacity is not a silver bullet, a magical solution, a cure-all, or a panacea. The number is not your savior. The number is not the answer to all of your challenges, but it is, and it will be part of the approach if visitor capacity is a tool you need. My colleague shared a story with me. She says right now that all she's doing is capacity work, and she shared that people come to her and think that number will be the savior. And what we shared is that it's not. So just remembering that while it's an important piece, that visitor capacity itself is part of visitor use management, and that one little number is not is not the savior. I understand why people feel that way though. Okay, so how do you decide when and where to apply the visitor capacity tool? So there's a tool available to you, and you're looking at it here. And again, I apologize if that's blocked, but that says visitor capacity decision tool on the left. And this can help you decide when and where visitor capacity can or must be determined. And back to the framework, if you're using that, this comes in, remember in the green part or step 10, when you've decided that it might be necessary to identify visitor capacities and the associated management strategies. So we'll use this decision tree, and again, I'll share these resources at the end. But the first question, I apologize. The first question will be, does this project involve an area where visitor capacity is legally required? So examples include places affected by Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, National Trails System Act, National Park and Recreation Act. So if it's legally required, I probably am not spoiling anything to say yes. You know, are you going to go to visitor capacity? Yes, you're legally required, and you'll move to the process for identifying that capacity as we just defined. Okay, so let's say it's not legally required. So you said no. This says have the framework elements been implemented, and what that means is, has the area purpose, project need, desired conditions been defined? Okay, so if they haven't, what I hope that I'm making clear is that no, if those things are not clear to you, that's okay. But what that means is that you would need to essentially go back and make sure that you understand your goal and where you're going, and what your purpose is. Okay, so let's say yes, you've gone through that and you feel like you have clarity. The next question you might ask yourself is the amount and type of use directly related to maintaining and achieving those desired conditions, right? So you've said, we know where we're headed, we've got this goal, desired condition. Does the amount and type of use tie to that? Okay. If no, it might be no. I'd love to hear an example of that. But if it's not, it means in that greater visitor use management framework, a visitor capacity may not be the thing you need. It may be that you have other tools in your visitor use management belt to address whatever the primary issue is, or whatever it is you need to get to that goal. Okay. However, if the amount and type of use is directly related, you think, to maintaining or achieving your desired condition, then yes. If it is, you're going to move to the process for identifying a visitor capacity. Okay, so let's talk about the process. You'll see that on the flow chart. So I'm going to move into, okay, you've gotten there, you decided, yes, this is where we're going. Let's talk about what that would look like. Okay, so what you're seeing here on the upper left in the gray, again, that's that bigger visitor use management planning effort. We're in that identifying management strategies, and now we've decided that where necessary, we're going to identify this visitor capacity. We've decided we think it's necessary. So there are 4 guidelines that I'm hoping will be helpful for you to determine to get there. So the first is determining the analysis area. You can ask, what's the most meaningful area of analysis? It could be a trail system, a river, a small place, a large place, Old Faithful, Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness, Deer Lake picnic area. And remember that sliding scale. If it's a small area, a small project, it would look a lot different as far as investment of time, money, and resources than, a forest planning effort, or, Jason Fisher's 5 wilderness areas. Or the publics that Jason is stewarding, I should say. So step 2, in this guidance, you've done this already in your visitor use management planning effort, but you'll review existing direction and knowledge. That could be law, existing management plans, current amounts of types of visitor use. You might have the data, your rangers may be collecting it, or you may have some other piece of data. Or you might reveal gaps that you need more. I'll just say a note on that. It comes up a lot, as far as reviewing existing direction and knowledge and looking at the data that you have, and you may reveal data gaps. And what I'll share is there's no perfect data set, and there's no rule of thumb if what you have is enough or not. And I just suggest don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. We have really a lot of data in my district, and it's not perfect, but it's really good, and we can use it to make sound decisions. So I'll just share that in the context of data. So additionally, thinking about reviewing these existing conditions, what are the major concerns coming up that you think are from amount and type of use that are impacting the resource or the desired conditions? What indicators and thresholds might you use that are tied to those key things? What indicators and thresholds are relevant? Are you already collecting this data? Can you utilize an existing data set? Okay, so you've determined the area, you've reviewed, and now you'll be identifying some limiting attributes. So I apologize here. So limiting attributes, they would look like what attributes constrain the analysis area ability to accommodate the visitor or to accommodate that visitor experience. They may vary across the analysis area. They could be social, environmental, they could be related to facilities. And then finally, identify capacity, right? Like getting to the number. And this is the hardest part. And ideally, because you've gone through this process and you have all of this info, you'll be set up to make this determination. And when you're thinking about this, what you're thinking is, what's the targeted amount and type of use we need to maintain or achieve our desired condition? So what do we need to do to get to our goal? And I'll just, it's amount and type. What I'll share on this, I know people want to know what's the formula, and there's no one formula. It really depends on all of the particular attributes of your project area and what you're experiencing. What I'll say is, if you've gone through this, trust your analysis and then build in adaptive management in case you didn't get it right. We talk about that a lot. Okay, and then finally, when you're thinking about this, on that step 4, you're going to come up with a capacity, and then you're going to think about how to allocate it. And thinking about allocation and the definition of capacity, back to my really highly scientific, how many things can a thing hold? If you can think of a glass jar pictured here, let's say the desired condition is that the jar does not overflow. Simple as that. The jar does not overflow. That's our goal. That's our desired condition. And you can fill it with any combination of marbles, sand, and water. If you think about that, you're going to have some options for how to allocate between the different types, right? So those are the types: sand, marbles, water, and amounts. Okay, so that's a way to think about, amounts and types of use and how that meets your goal. Okay, I know these slides are packed, so thanks for going through them with me here. Okay, so all right, so that we've gone through the decision tree. We've talked about a process for determining your capacity, and if you recall from an earlier slide, there's 2 parts to it. First is the identification of the capacity, and we just went there with our 4 guidelines. And now that you have it, the second part is identifying management strategies to implement that visitor capacity. So what I'll share is there are a variety of management strategies and concepts. I'll just share a few. What you'll see on the screen are, 8 general approaches for management. Modifying type of use, modifying timing of use, location, increasing the ability of sites to handle use. I can think of a couple of examples of that. And the last one you see there is reduce or increase the supply. These management actions and strategies can exist along a continuum. So from influencing and regulating visitor behavior to subtle, to obvious, to direct and indirect. And we often use the concepts of engineering, education, and enforcement to describe this continuum. So a common recommendation is to begin with the less direct and more subtle strategies first, and, and then move across that continuum. So to give you an example, if your goal was to maintain an undeveloped buffer around a riparian corridor to protect boreal toads, could you use a subtle engineering strategy, maybe boulders in an undesirable campsite, rather than signs and a no camping special regulation? I don't have the answer for you, but these are tools that help you think along those continuums and identify management strategies. And don't forget, you might utilize many at the same time. Okay, so throughout all of this, don't forget to think about how management actions will impact the visitor. And I'll just show one final tool. We think about the visitor, but you can also think about this as, this triangle of compromise. So as you're considering all of this, you can ask yourself how this will impact the visitor, the social setting, how it'll impact the resource, the physical setting, and how it'll impact us, the agency or manager. But the most important to remember when selecting your management strategy, including if that's a permit, is that they should help you get to your goal. And you always go back to the why, which is to maintain and achieve your desired condition. Okay, so I bet you're feeling duped because you came here to talk about permits, and I'm just finally getting to it. So let's say you've gone there, you've gone through all of this, and you've decided that after walking through this process, you're going to implement a permit system, and specifically a use limiting permit system. So I'm going to
I'm going to just let you know that we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. I'm very close.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I'll share these with everyone. Okay, I know that's a busy slide, but let's say you've gone there and you decided, I would like to implement a limited use permit system. These are some questions you can ask yourself, and you'll note this is from 1989, and I think it still applies. And thanks, Linda Merigliano, for sharing. I think it's written in kind of maxim language, like you must do this or that, but I would offer to just use this as a litmus test. And so I'll go quickly through them, or I'm going to highlight a couple just so I can get to the end here. But what you'll see there is what we've discussed. Agreement on the desired condition is number one. Agreement on acceptable levels of impact. Clear relationship between use levels and that goal you're trying to achieve. Number four, use levels must be a more important factor than visitor behavior. So an example I give is a permit system will not fix a visitor behavior problem always, but a permit system won't fix a human waste problem. Might be part of helping, but it won't fix it. And the number six, I just want to call that one out. The agency must have resources to administer those use limits. That's a hard truth and likely resonates. And I've talked with many managers with limited use permit systems that aren't effective for that reason. So I can share this as a litmus test if you're deciding that you want to go there. So the last two I'm going to skip through. I had two examples. And Conundrum Hot Springs in the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness, a visitor capacity has been implemented. And the goal is to reduce biophysical impact to restore natural conditions. So there's an option to think about how that is achieving that very specific goal in that setting. Similarly, to me, the one that comes up is COVID-19, and I know I know we've talked about it a lot, but to me, geez, like rapid fire visitor capacity decisions happened in that context. Some of you probably did it in the context of land management, restaurants, et cetera, and lots of options for coming up with the desired condition, a lot of times keeping people safe, providing a service. And so it's interesting to think about in the context of visitor. Lessons, get in the arena. I'm a big Brene Brown fan, so I know this is hard, but just getting in and starting to tackle that using these tools that we have. being honest and transparent through this. I won't sit in front of you and say I'm pro or anti-permit. I see it as a tool in the belt, and I appreciate these processes. And I think being honest with people is very powerful, and honest with ourselves. The only constant is change. I'm not telling you all anything you don't know, but that's a big lesson in this. Inviting information and listening. If you can't get out of it, get into it. And I am not aware of an easier magic solution. Okay, so this is my last slide. I know I went right up to the buzzer, and I apologize for that, Jimmy. So finally, I'm just going to go back to my original slide and conversation, and thinking about now what we've gone through. And remember the person on the left who came thinking that she needed a permit system. You know, how I picture this now is this. You know, I picture that she would be sitting up straighter. She's proud that she cares for the place and voiced her concerns. She might be empowered by the tools and info she now knows is available to her. She senses there's no right answer or magic number or across the board solution, and she has the language and process to work through this challenge. She understands that permits are nested into a larger intentional visitor use management process, and she understands how to get to the core. So this is where we left off, and the conversation continues like this. Remember I said me, that's me on the right. I hear you. It sounds like you're frustrated. It also sounds like you genuinely care about the place you're describing. And it may be that a permit system could help, but first help me understand more. And she says, awesome, let me start with the why. And I willingly become the student listening again. Thanks, Jimmy. Sorry, I know I went right up on the time. I'll find a meaningful way to share the resources.
Hey, that was great, Katie. Thank you very much. We are recording this. Honestly, I've thought of a few people that I would love to be able to have them watch this with me. It might help with our communication on some things. And so I know I see a use for it already. And just, I'm going to field one question here, and we'll see how it goes time-wise, but from Becky Blanchard. Is there a working group or a community of practice for people in the agency working on visitor capacity?
Geez, I wonder if there's someone on here who knows better than I. I'm guessing there is, so I invite anyone within the agency who knows to answer that. What I'll share is the working group that I've been affiliated with is the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council, and that's allowed me to connect with other folks working on it, but I invite if anyone is aware of something. I'm guessing it exists.
So I know, I think I saw Steve Chesterton on here. The closest thing that I've been involved with is we have a monthly river management community of practice, Wild and Scenic River Management. And so because we have so many comprehensive river management plans occurring right now that require us to look at capacity, there is a portion of that community that spends time on that, but it's not the sole focus. But if anyone else has any thoughts, feel free to speak up.
And Jimmy, if I can do a plug for folks who are interested in more case studies, I dropped it into the chat, but WSI is doing a summer series, and we're doing one on July 21st with 3 different areas with limited use permit systems and comparing and contrasting. So I dropped that in the chat. That would be another opportunity to dig in more case study format.
Excellent. All right. Well, hey, I'm going to wrap us up. Katie, that was awesome. Thank you for doing that.